love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. My very special guest today is Don Cicchettie. How are you going, Don? Good to have you back.
Doing great. Good to be here.
Yeah, I loved our conversation, and I was sitting there this morning. Did I chat to Don, or was that just a dream? And it was only May last year, and of course we chatted, and I've just been away for a week and pretty much was doing 12-hour days. And it's been my body feels like it's here, but my brain feels like it's still on the freeway somewhere.
You had a big music festival you went to, didn't you?
Yes, and then a week before that, or a couple of weeks before that, I was in Brisbane at another festival, and just before that, I was in Melbourne.
Oh, that's great.
It's been busy. To be honest, I prefer being here 3 times a week, and my house is 20 meters over that way. I've got my nice little studio set up, and I enjoy chatting to people and connecting with the SDA Q&A audience more than traveling around now. Must be getting old.
We're all getting old.
Now, for those who don't know or who may have missed the last interview we did together, we're fellow musos, and I'd just like you to share a little bit about your career, where you're from, and what's been happening in your life up to this point. Just very quickly, the brief version. And then we're going to talk about your interesting title, Did Music Kill My Church? It's got so many nuances and sub-levels. I can't wait to explore that a bit more. So, yeah.
I picked up a guitar in high school at this academy, and I was playing songs in a couple of weeks, and then started writing songs a year or two later. And so what I do more than anything else is write, and that's my first love. I've got a nice studio at home, and that's the real short version. I've been in it since 1967, and I still love it. I'm finishing up right now. Picked my 10, 12 best songs, and a brand new one called the Resurrection Overture, and that's my biggie. I'm going to get that done first.
That's great. And you've been involved with various Adventist institutions sharing a music as an employee or as a subcontractor?
No, I ran the media department at La Sierra and worked in Loma Linda for 5 years. But I was a director at La Sierra for, gosh, 10 years. And I taught classes in media technology. How's this stuff actually work? Not what everybody thinks it works, but how's this stuff actually work?
Mm.
And we had a blast. I loved teaching and I loved working on a college campus. The campus politics weren't any fun, and the pay wasn't great, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. And I love to see people come up and say, "Oh, Don recorded me." I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I love that was my best part.
Well,
That was the best part of my job.
in our promo post, Val Torres said, and hi Val, he said, Don recorded my senior recital at La Sierra University. So I'm sure you recorded many of those.
I did about 200 CDs, and I did. Oh gosh, Daniel Lau is now the music director at the Boston Pops, and he entered the California State piano competition with a recording we did for him. And there wasn't any digital back then. It was a big reel to reel. We took the lid off the piano, put a couple of Norman microphones over the top. It was stunning. And he entered that. He got second place in the state of California at the age of 14.
Wow.
And he's now music director at the last I heard, at least at the Boston Philharmonic.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Boston Pops, I'm sorry.
Boston Pops, yeah.
Yeah.
Now Rochelle asks, overture, does that mean you write classical music, Don?
I writing, my wife passed away in 2021 from COVID, and I had a long talk with God. This is a long story. I'll make it real short. A long talk with God one night. What am I here for? What's my life all about? And I decided that one of the things I'm going to do with the balance of my years here is write an overture to give people hope. To believe that theologian Dallas Willard says we are eternal. I'll try to remember the exact quote. We are unceasing spiritual beings with an eternal destiny in God's great universe. And I wanted to actually make an overture that made you feel like hearing that. So that's what it's about. And the trumpet blasts and the people talking and Jesus. When he said in the story of Lazarus in John 11, he stayed in Jerusalem until Lazarus had died, frankly. And he said he kept telling the disciples, Lazarus is asleep. And then when Lazarus had died, at least the physical body had died, Jesus said, let's go to Bethany. I'm going to wake him up now. And there just wasn't any, he didn't take it so seriously. He went down to Bethany and raised him. And I just found that an unbelievably compelling story. And so that's what I want to do is to write. I have a friend who's a wonderful classical composer, Peter Boyer, one of our leading composers today. I built him a studio, and I called him up and I said, I have a few bucks. I want to commission you to write a Resurrection Overture, 3 or 4 minutes, no big deal. And he can't do it. He said, I've got 4 years of commissions, I can't take anything else on. He said, you should try this yourself. I said, well, it's one thing to write a rock song or a folk song. It's quite another thing to write classical stuff. He says melody, harmony, tempo, harmonizations.
All there.
It says you can do this. And so I showed him, the little beginnings of that. And he liked it. And I kind of put it before God. And I said, I'm going to sit at the piano now. And if I can come up with a melodic theme, what is the melodic theme? Right? You go with any overture, any opera has a melodic theme that repeats. Go back to the Who's Tommy. And this melodic theme goes all the way through it. So I sat down at the piano and it instantly came out. It just, the theme just came right to me. And I said, thank you. We've got it. So from here on out, it's just fleshing it out.
That's great. Can't wait to hear it.
Thank you.
With your involvement with the Adventist Church, but also having an eye on the broader community of music in all genres, I'm imagining, did you notice within the Adventist Church in your part of the world, during the 70s, did they embrace that sort of Jesus gospel hippie
Oh, I'm glad you
kind of
you
rock
mentioned
music?
no, they hated it. And
Yeah.
we had in San Diego. Have you been to San Diego?
Yeah, I have.
Absolutely lovely little town,
Yeah.
big town now. And several of the theology majors from this would have been 70, 71, came down from La Sierra that were majors there, and they started a summer project, which was a beach house right along. I don't know if you ever heard any of this, but right along the Pacific coast, there, right on the water, just literally 2 houses from it, and it was they got tables and chairs, set up a little stage. Christian musicians would come in and play Christian music. They witness to people, and they would serve vegetarian food. And they would also go out on the beach, on the boardwalk or the concrete walk, and witness to people. And it was very effective. And it was actually during the time when the Jesus movement was happening up in Orange County with Chuck Smith, and Greg
Yeah.
Lord, and I met Chuck, by the way. That's another story.
Wow.
And
Have you seen the movie that came out a couple of years
I
ago?
love the movie.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, I love the movie. What a time that was.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we had a similar sort of much smaller.
Yeah.
The church stomped it. It was doing really well.
Yeah.
The church just shut it down. And I don't know if you're old enough to have read the Review and Herald and all that sort of stuff in the 60s, 68, 69. There was Kenneth H. Wood was the editor.
Heard about him. Yeah.
I think Neil Wilson was still president back then.
Yeah,
And
he was.
they had a jihad basically against what they called worldlings.
Yes.
A worldling is an unsaved or a non-Adventist person. Well, that's everybody. That's B.B. King. That's Pete Townsend. That's Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. They're all worldlings, but there's still a lot of great music.
Yes.
Aaron Copland must be a worldling.
Yeah.
And I just always found that term very offensive, and I'd always thought that the worldlings were our field of work. That's where you go, where the worldlings are, to bring the gospel to them. And yet the Adventist church back then was absolutely determined to shut that nation Jesus movement down, stomp it. So all the guys that were running that place down there on the beach got reassigned and sent that to college. They closed that down. They got rid of their youth pastor at our church, and all those churches now, San Diego Broadway, San Diego North Park, Pacific Beach, I think there's about 4 of the, and I may be wrong here. I'm sure there'll be people correcting me on this. They've all been consolidated into one church called Tierra Santa. The pastor is a great guy, but it's not like it's mobbed. It's not full to the gills. So all these churches, which is what my article was about, heaven and the changing of generations. That article was about the complete loss of the North Park Church. It's gone. It's been bulldozed. And what's in there now are horrible hipster apartments.
Yeah. It's that's what made me think of it, your article. I'll put a link to that later on. It's a Spectrum article, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll share a link in the comments soon. Yeah, the same thing happened over here, late 60s, like that Jesus movement echoed around the world. And particularly the UK, parts of Europe here, and of course New Zealand and all over your great country. But same kind of thing. There were people here in the late 60s. I don't know if you should have a listen to my interviews with Bob Wolfgram, Genna Levitch, and Lowell Tarling. Those three were Sally Hilda. I won't start naming the musicians because that's a whole interview then on just that topic. But those guys and others, and there was a Pastor Johansson in Melbourne. Oh, I've just got a mental blank. Was it Jim? People watching can let me know. But the identical kind of thing, and the Adventist leadership systematically shut it down over a period of 10 years. We may have gotten away with it a bit longer than you guys, but there was about a
Yeah.
10-year period. But street preaching, we didn't say worldling, we said worldly, the worldly people.
The world.
Yeah, and
Yeah, the ones Jesus came to save, those guys.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I got into the tail end of it, maybe 79 and into the early 80s. But by the time we hit about 85, the church had well and truly stomped it out.
Yeah. They don't have anything to do with it. That's why the church is empty today. And
isn't it sad?
I've thought about this. I found out recently, it actually just floored me. The NAD, North American Adventism, the population of North American Adventists is now equal between African Americans and Caucasians. The white church in North America, in America, black Americans are 13% of the population, 12, 13, depending whose studies you read. And there used to be, you probably know something about the black church goes all the way back to Ellen White. It's a very vital church. They really mean it. It's an alive church. I mean, it's really a different organization. And
well, they have separate conferences, don't they? In the States,
they do. And I absolutely love Black Adventist churches. I will go to one anywhere in the world. And they've always treated me really well. So, but the white church was a whole different thing. And right now, there are more Black Adventist Americans in the church than there are white. When they're 13% of the population,
that's interesting.
How big of a collapse do you have to have more Black Adventists in North America than white?
Yeah.
That's a huge collapse.
Just imagine if the church had embraced in the late 70s, not saying exclusively, but allowed it to have its own little corner. If they'd embraced that music movement, and if they'd embraced the Des Ford theology, what an incredible rich, diverse church the Adventist church would be now.
By any measure, historically, you have to say that the Jesus movement was the latest and one of the greatest revivals that's ever hit the world.
Yeah,
it is a huge deal, and it changed the entire world. And Adventism deliberately opted out of it.
Yeah, it's just tragic. I was lucky to get involved with other denominations in about 1981, 82. And by 1983, I was performing and playing in any Christian denomination in my area and all over the country. And we, my band, we supported a lot of those Jesus movement artists that come the early 80s were touring Australia and kind of bringing back a little bit of a revival. And you'd know Larry Norman, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we got to be his support act in
that's great.
one of his shows. And it was such a special moment. Here he is on stage with his very long white straight hair, or blonde straight hair, and just him and his guitar. And the hall would have maybe seated about 1,400 people, but they squeezed in 2,000 people.
Sure.
And the energy of the contemporary sound, the lyrics, the concept of being a follower of Jesus, community was just amazing. And we had in the Adventist church many people like yourself that were poised to usher in this kind of music, and not just a style of worldly music, but a style of music that connected with people outside of the church. And I just look, it's one of my greatest points of sadness when I think about the theology and the music of the late 70s, if embraced by the Adventist church, would have changed the whole denomination for the better.
Yeah. No, you really can't overstate it. It was the last great awakening and the last great revival that the Christian church has ever seen.
Yeah.
And
there's been nothing like it since.
Yeah. And the result of ignoring and rejecting the Jesus movement was the empty churches. I started in New York City Jamaica Adventist Academy, Junior Academy, it's gone. We moved out here to Pomona, and Pomona Junior Academy, it's gone. San Diego Academy's been bulldozed. There's a little tiny version of it up the street, but the big one's been bulldozed. San Pasquale Academy's gone. Atlantic Union College is gone. PUC struggling. The result of rejecting the next generation completely, just saying, get out, we don't care about you. And let me say, my article makes this point of oh, we're the young people and we're hip and cool and we're going to take over. That's just as bad as the old one. I think if I've been a pastor during that time, I would have done a blended worship where you have a praise band, but for about half or third of the songs, you stop playing. They did this at Willow Creek years ago, and I went to a seminar there, and they just mute the guitars, and pick out some lovely hymn, Amazing Grace or something, a cappella. The whole audience sings it. There are so many absolutely stunning, gorgeous hymns that when nobody sings in church anymore.
Yeah.
So the result of rejecting it, of the Jesus movement, had been that the modern music completely took over in all the modern megachurches. And hymns have been just about lost. And that's just about as bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in a vineyard church. I won't name names. I was in a vineyard church with a lovely pastor. And I mentioned something about the Messiah. He'd never heard it.
What?
He'd never heard Handel's Messiah.
You're kidding
and
me.
So I actually bought him a copy, all the discs and everything, gave it to him. And he came back after a week and said, I listened to it end to end. He said, that's absolutely stunning, stunning music. I said, that is kind of the ultimate of expression of the faith of our fathers. I mean, you get Bach's Magnificat, you get this, you get that. There's wonderful stuff, but the Messiah is, you can't get around it. It's a boulder in the road. It's huge, and he'd never heard of it. So
that is so interesting.
Adventists have lost the Jesus movement,
Yeah.
and the non-Adventist churches, which have taken over the Jesus movement, have lost hymns.
Yeah.
And I think both of them are tragic.
I've just put a link in the Facebook and YouTube comments section if people want it, to your Spectrum article. I'd encourage people to go and read it. It's interesting. Rochelle just mentioned, and this is a reflection of how Adventists love to keep people away from some incredible things that have happened in the world. Rochelle says, as a millennial, I'm not even sure I know what you're referring to when you say Jesus movement. Guess to do some research. And Rochelle, I would add to that, I think it's not that just that you're a millennial, but it's you were raised a Seventh-day Adventist and millennial. Because
just watch that movie, Jesus Revolution.
Yes, go and watch that movie. It's just called Jesus Revolution, is it?
Yeah, Jesus Revolution.
It is amazing.
Chuck Smith
it's amazing. That truly captures what it was like here in Australia, and there, of course, where it began in California. But
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The best part in the movie, in my opinion, I was just about on the floor crying. The financial backers of Chuck Smith's church. It was nearly empty, but he had a couple of rich guys who kept the place going. And they told him, if you don't get rid of these hippies, we're going to leave. So he didn't get rid of the hippies, and they left. The next Sunday morning, Chuck Smith showed up at the door, opened the door up, and he was foot washing. Each hippie would come in, and he'd wash his feet and dry it off, and he'd go sit down. This is what Chuck did.
Yes.
To reject the hate of these nasty old people who were going to shut that church down. He washed the hippies' feet. What would Jesus do?
Exactly. And so many thoughts are flooding into my head. But Rochelle, as you said that comment there about the Jesus movement, and honestly, Adventist young people, and from young millennials to baby boomers, from Zoomers to boomers, the Adventist church will keep you away from any of this rich culture that is out there. I was chatting to someone this morning as I was queuing up for the bank. I had to go to the bank. That's why we ran a bit late today. I apologize. And this person is around my age. We were at college in the early 80s, or Avondale University now, and her husband is still currently a Seventh Adventist minister of the kind that was influenced by the Jesus movement, both in the Des Ford theology and in the contemporary Christian music. And she said, I was talking about the podcast and how we're doing a re-release of season 2 and Glacier View, which, by the way, tomorrow we're doing the re-release of the Ross Cole interview, which is really interesting. And anyway, she said, "Oh, I don't really know much about that. What? I've never heard of Glacier View. What's that?" And I said, "If you know Dr. Ford, though, right?" "Oh, I've heard little bits about him." And I thought that the Adventist Church systemically keeps people away from some of the most exciting, buoyant, conversational pieces, music pieces in our history, in the history of the planet.
Yeah,
It's just a
I can tell you,
tragedy.
you millennials would have loved. You would have loved the Jesus movement. It was absolutely.
They certainly would have. And I remember in the, when would it have been? Early 90s, maybe. I was asked to sing and play for an Adventist. They were getting real cool and hip. And they said, we're going to have a 60s and 70s night. Can you come and do the music? Now, to me, when you say 60s, 70s, I'm thinking Beatles, Eagles, Jimi Hendrix, Rolling Stones. And I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. So I came along with, I'd been singing in the secular world as well as all the other denominations. So I came along ready to rock it up with my amp, and we had drums and bass. And I realized very soon that what they meant by the 60s was Peter, Paul and Mary. We have a group over here called the Seekers. They didn't even know anything about the songs that I'd started singing. And lucky I knew all the other ones as well. So I quickly switched directions. But it's just this naivety and ignorance to what's going on in the broader world of music, arts, politics, theology. It's very Ellen White centered, standards centered, and it just mutes your life. It mutes.
They simply missed it.
Yeah,
they missed the whole
it,
thing.
and it's done.
They went right past them. I'll tell you a tangential story to that. We did at La Sierra University for 10, 15 years. We did what was called the Easter pageant, which was Steve Daly's. You know who Steve is. Steve Daly was the chaplain, and he actually produced it, wrote it, and it was the man. He made it happen. I was the technical director and did all the recordings. It was all recorded and we put it on CDs, and it was all lip sync. You couldn't tell, but that's how we did it. And that way people didn't have to memorize every single line. There are 5 different scenes all over campus, and they had donkeys and camels and everything you can imagine. It was really cool. And the Easter pageant brought in 5,000 people from the community each year. So one time, Steve and I were sitting in the engineering in the studio, the control room, and he goes, we play Handel Messiah every year for this. What else? What can we do different? And that little devil on his shoulder, he goes, "Oh, I've got something we could do." He said, "What? Play it for me." So I put the Who on. See me, feel it. See me.
Oh, I love it.
Feel me. Right. Jesus is in the tomb. The light comes down. The smoke comes up. Touch me, heal me. Make a real short intro. Bah, 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 and then the door opens up. Listen to you, right?
Yes.
It's so cool. It would have been up. Now I know Pete Townsend's a follower of Me Here Baba. It's not a Christian song.
No.
And I played it for Steve, and he goes, "We've got to do that." And I said, let me tell you 2 things. One thing is he can sue us. We don't have permission.
No.
He's not going to give us permission to use it in a Christian context like that. and I only have a week before the show. I can't get permission by then. And he says, "Oh man," he said, "I think we should do it." I say, "Well, we could risk it. We could just do it. Hope it doesn't get back to him. He's all over in London." He said, "Yeah, we should do that." And I said, "Here's the other thing. You realize that when that is done, that's the ending scene of the Easter pageant. Do you realize how many angry old men from the conference you're going to have in your face?" And this is something that's in my notes. There's nothing in the world that will make an Adventist put their fists up quicker than music fights.
Yeah, of course.
Oh my goodness. I said,
Mm.
"Steve, they're going to get around you and push you in a corner, and they're
Yeah.
going to scream at you for
Yeah.
playing the Who with their thing. You're going to, I mean,
Oh.
it's really going to get ugly."
Yeah.
So he didn't care. Steve, he didn't care. I don't care. Let's do it. But I thought the better of it, and I didn't want to get sued. And I thought, as my fiduciary duty to the school was to make sure the school doesn't get sued for copyright infringement.
Yeah. There's no way you could have got away with it. Yeah.
Because the school has deep pockets. Could I have gotten away with it? Almost certainly.
No.
So, but wouldn't that have been cool?
That would have been so good. Yeah.
And they have Jesus on wires.
Yeah.
And they winch him up through a hole in the roof. That's the Ascension. And then there's lights coming down, lights going up, smoke everywhere. It would have been wonderful. But it was one of those things where that disconnect that you're talking about, where the church has moved people so far away, to then break that door open so bluntly and so loudly and so clearly right in their face, they would have had a stroke.
Yeah. And some people in the comments are saying, "Oh, wow, we didn't see that," or, in our churches. What we're talking about is something that could have happened. It didn't happen in the Adventist church.
That's right.
Like, there were pockets of it. I can think of 3 places in Australia where you may have edged close to what we're talking about. And in the church in the States, less than a handful of places. And it was stomped on so fast that anything that did take place later was hugely watered down or done on the streets away from Adventist prying eyes and control. It did not happen. Whereas in the broader Christian community, it is only just starting to die out now. It kind of kicked off, and it just, the whole Christian music, it changed the world. It continues to this day. It's what fueled bands like the Newsboys.
I love the Newsboys, especially the old
Australian band originally.
Yeah, the Peter Furler Newsboys, the old ones.
My band supported them as well. I got to hang out with them and meet them and chat with
God's
them.
People singing, Lord,
yeah,
Lord.
What a song! Yeah.
It doesn't get any better than that in Christian music.
That is what a good song. That is so good. So sadly, and Sunday Law Cumming has written, the SDAs don't know what they're missing. So true. Yeah.
No, that's right.
So look, we have purposely been giving a little bit of background there. We've got slightly off track, but the point is, we're chatting here with Don about music, and Don Cicchettie, and we're exploring this notion of what Adventists have missed out on with music and theology, because its leaders, A, they want to kind of suppress both sides, but B, they really secretly have to support the more conservative, traditional heritage Adventist.
And if I had to,
really, that's what Adventism is.
If I had to do over again, I'd use the Who and the Easter Pageant.
Just press play, boom, away you go.
Yeah.
You know what we might do one week, because there's some loopholes for watching movies if you have it as a commentary and something you watch together. We should have a Jesus Revolution program and just have everyone come in and watch. But look, I highly recommend, if you want to get a taste of what we're talking about, go and check out that movie.
Yeah, the movie's really good. And as a Christian, to watch all those people come to the Lord and see the miracles and stuff, it's just wonderful. Now, there's a little bit of a sour note here and there with Lonnie Frisbee. Lonnie Frisbee was a very strange man who did a lot of LSD. But there's no denying that Lonnie Frisbee helped found Calvary Chapel, and he helped found the Vineyard after that.
Yeah.
Lonnie Frisbee's a huge figure. And he
Yeah.
had terrible problems, but Chuck Smith took it and ran with it, and then John Wimber took it and ran with it. But there was something else I was going to tell you. The current hip young pastor in a surf shoot isn't much better, a little bit better. They'll let you do praise band music. I put new. I won't name the church. I don't want to get the guy's name involved. Well, I put new sound in a church locally, and nice new speakers and everything. And he comes up in his surfer shoot, and the pastor, and he's telling me how we let young people play modern music here. I said, that's great. I said, that's great. I said, can I ask you a question? He said, what? If somebody wrote this song in your church and they came in and played it for you, would you let them do it? And King Zach says, you are the one, who causes me pain. King is coming, yeah, right? It's basically cursing Satan and saying God's coming back and he's going to kick you all over the place.
Yeah.
And
Kick your butt.
And it's metal, right? And I played that song for him, and he goes, and I said, would you let him play that? He says, and he got up and walked away. And I thought to myself, and all those kids, all those millennials and others in that church would not have had that young man's witness.
No.
And you can never replace. If they had one of their own wrote something like that, what are you going to replace that with?
Yeah. And you'd be, every time you share anything of that nature, that Jesus Revolution music, inside the Adventist Church, even if they say you can play it, you're immediately met with half the audience looking like deer in headlights.
No, that's right.
And the other half are kind of enjoying it, but no, they can't get. There was the big thing about don't lift your hands up too high, certainly not past your shoulders. Might be a little bit of this, and there's no receiving of it. There's no truly getting into it. And then after the gig, you're going to be told off for this and that, and it's just ridiculous. I've just realized how lucky I was that from 1983 to 2013, I was deeply involved in playing in the general Christian music scene, and they embraced me so, like, for 16 years, we were the closing act of a big festival over here called Black Stump Christian Arts Festival. The Adventists wouldn't have even dreamt of having us consistently play that kind of music.
Yeah.
But the Baptists, Uniting Church, Episcopalians, Anglicans, they embraced us, and I'm very great. I've just realized how grateful I am today
what a blessing
for that opportunity. For how many years is that? 83 to 2013, just constantly immersed and invited to sing at all these other Christian denominations. That full-on Christian rock music, praise and worship music. I just realized how lucky I was. And you kind of assume that the Adventist young people are doing it as well, but you're really only dipping in every now and again and giving them a taste of it. The rest of the time, it's just a suppression of worship.
No, that's right. And it's worship in the vernacular. And the way to limit it, in other words, not having to take over your church, is to do blended worship, sing hymns too. It worked beautifully at Willow Creek. It worked everywhere I'd seen it done. You want to rock out, then turn the guitar down and everyone's singing a hymn together, rockapella. It changes everything. It's absolutely wonderful. There's no reason, and no one's doing that, hardly no one is doing that. I'll tell you one more funny story. You know who Kevin Paulson is?
Yes.
Kevin is a paleo Adventist, right?
I think I interviewed him.
Yeah, he's a character.
Yeah.
And he was still in school, I believe. And I was doing, in Loma Linda, they had something called the Maranatha Festival, which was their attempt to do Jesus music in Loma Linda, which is a fairly liberal, open-minded place. So I was doing the sound for that, and I set the system up. And if you've ever played with sound at all, before the event, you just play music. You want to know if
Yeah.
the system goes down, you lose the highs,
Yeah. Bit of
lose the,
tweaking here and there.
you've got to be playing, not to play loud, but you have to hear it. You keep the system working, and you never shut it down and hope it starts back up again. When the people show up, you have it running. So I was playing some, I don't remember classical. I was playing something, and Kevin walked in the building, and he walks up to me and orders me to turn that music off. And I said, Kevin, it's not music, it's noise. What do you mean? I'm doing sound. 20 bands are depending on me for sound. I have to know the system keeps working. I play the music through it to make sure the system is still functional. That's all. I don't even know what songs are. I don't care. I'm just making sound. Well, I don't care about that. You need to shut that music off right now.
Yeah.
And I said, no, Kevin, I'm not going to shut the music off. I'm sorry you don't like the music, but your opinion about the music isn't terribly important to me. I'm sorry. And I turned away to walk away, and they actually had to hold him back. He was charging at me, and
It's incredible.
His buddy had to hold him back, and I said, you have no authority in this event. You have no authority over me. Get out of my building. And that was the last I saw of Kevin.
Wow, that's mind blowing. I've just remembered the first time I played at this Black Stump Festival I was telling you about would have been in the early 90s.
Yeah.
At the end of our gig, Christian festival, not an Adventist festival.
Right.
Everyone had been dancing and singing and hands in the air and blending rock and roll with gospel. It was just an amazing night. And I literally would have been shot in an Adventist situation if I'd done that kind of music.
Yeah.
Anyway, afterwards, this guy came up to me, and he was an older guy. And I thought, I bet he's one of the organizers. I'm about to get into huge trouble, which is what I expected after almost every gig in the Adventist church. Anyway, he came up so I kind of delayed talking to him, pretended to be winding up cables, and he waited patiently. And eventually he came over and we chatted, and he literally embraced me and said, thank you for that amazing gig. And for and I was like, for touching the hearts of everyone that was here. And I was fully embracing myself for the kind of reaction you were just talking about, where their eyes start popping out in the blood veins, and they want you down, out.
Turn that off right now.
They pull the power cable out a couple of times over here, once on me, once on a friend of mine. And I couldn't believe the acceptance I felt. Now, I will say one thing, and you've probably found this too, and it came into mind when Rochelle said this. In all fairness, Adventists look super awkward when they try to raise their hands up. It goes against their restrained nature. And I have found, though, that Adventist audiences can be the best ever if you come in with lots of icebreakers. Bit of humor, bit of fun songs, bit of la 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 la, and then by the end of it, you can kind of lift the game a little bit and lift the energy, and they can be amazing, but it takes a lot of effort and a lot of work.
If you're very personable and you talk to them a little bit and you come across well and you don't play the Who, they'll like it. That brings up another. When I was at PUC, they had the Heritage Singers there. We could do a whole story on the Heritage Singers. The Heritage Singers were highly calculated to fit in to the Adventist church and not offend anyone.
Totally.
There's no real musical depth there. They're just
pretty harmonies.
We're not going to throw you out with that music. So here's the gymnasium. Have you been to PUC? The gym is huge. And that's where they had their big events. And the place was mobbed with people. In the back, all the music department professors standing up in the rear.
Even with them.
Very angry. And I came over and I was talking to them. And they kind of embraced me. I'm one of theirs, And I realized that they saw a hard rock guy like me who loves classical music, who's very influenced by it, but plays loud music. They saw me as a colleague, and the heritage singers as I haven't got a word for it, but they hated them, absolutely hated them. And I thought that was the strangest phenomenon. That they would hate the heritage singers and like the hard rock guy. I was like, what?
It's yeah, that's unusual. That doesn't add up.
Well, it doesn't. When you treasure classical music like they do, and you give them their due, and
Right.
as music teachers have been fabulous supporters of
Yeah.
great music. Now, you want to learn
Yeah.
music theory? I had a wonderful man named Perry Beach who taught me a lot of music theory. I'd run out of compositional ideas. I was doing the same old all over again. And he showed me how to reharmonize things, how to use ninths, spread the chord out, that sort of thing. Just amazing mentor in music. And the advanced music departments had tons of those guys. Brilliant, brilliant professors. So I really don't want to be critical. I like them a lot more than I like the heritage singers. I thought the heritage singers were very cynical, prepackaged, and they won't offend anyone, and they won't really move anyone. And to me, it was a very strange juxtaposition, with the music department in the back and the heritage singers.
Yeah.
Happiness is to love the Savior, and I'm going like,
And they still were unhappy with that. Interesting.
I don't know. And one more brief thing. I had a blues song we should do. This is what that article's about. We had a little band called the Gospel Blues Band. We were all 19 to 22, and college kids and blues fans, big blues guys. And we had a African American man, about 45, who was recommended to us, who was a fabulous singer, and he was our vocalist. And what we would do, we would change gospel-y, hymnal-y songs into blues. So one of our best ones was "Have a Little Talk with Jesus."
Oh yeah.
It's the BB King. I was lost in sin, bop, 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 on the guitar, right? And Jesus took me in, right? Very slow blues,
Yeah.
right? And then when you come to the chorus, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's have a little talk with Jesus. Go straight gospel. Tell
Yeah.
them all about the trouble, right? Boogie woogie. And we will
Yeah.
hear
We
our
love it.
faintest cry, and it will help us by and by. Do, right? Straight gospel. And boy, that's what we got thrown out for in that story. That's what we were playing. And so I was telling my friend Curtis. Curtis Wright's a fabulous musician, banjo player, songwriter, all kinds of stuff. He's African American. I told him about getting thrown out of church not once, 2 or 3 times for that song. And he said, well, it must be because of the white church. I said, that's very likely. I said, you'd probably get away with that in the black church. So he was at PUC, and he went down to Paulin Hall, the music department, on a Saturday afternoon and played it, and they threw him out.
Yeah.
And he came to me and he said, I played your song, and I got thrown out. And I said, man, if they'll throw a black guy out for playing gospel, they've got a major problem.
It's all over.
So yeah, I mean that gospel blues thing just ticked the damn angered people.
Yeah. And Frank Merendino just points out that a lot of the CCM, the Christian contemporary music scene, it has turned into third-rate kind of rock or pop music with Jesus lyrics, and I think that's a trend mirroring the secular realm as well, where everything is just pop candy.
Yeah.
I'm not just being, you're just thinking that about that, the younger people. No, not at all. There's something that happens when things become hugely marketable,
monetized.
They go from your nice little local grocery store to your big chain stores, and everything's just literally, music has become cardboard cutout pop formula. And just a quick yeah. So let's segue now into our topic of today. And I was very interested when I said, "Hey, can you give me a title for today?" And you said, "Did Jesus? Sorry, did music kill my church?" And I thought I was wanting to ask you some questions about it. And I thought, you know what, that's so nuanced and opens up so many ideas. I'm just going to leave it to you to unpack. So, why did you come across that title, and what are you meaning by it?
When I look at the Jesus movement, what were its ideas? Both God's world and Satan's world are largely spread by the power of ideas. Dallas Willard said that the bad ideas that Satan comes up with, they're viral. Someone will say them to another guy passes them around. Guy, you don't need a marriage document. That's just a piece of paper. Or take LSD. You'll be enlightened. There's all kinds of really bad ideas that the baby boomers had that they just passed to each other. And Dallas said that the devil can take a vacation because they're doing his work for them, passing on bad. Well, there's also good ideas. And if you look at the Jesus movement, the good ideas are first century Christianity. What does that mean? They tried to figure it out. Baptism in the ocean, unpretentious. Witnessing to people, never at any time being afraid to talk to someone about your faith. Praying for miracles if that's appropriate. The power of the direct connection that those people wanted with Jesus Christ was remarkable. It was absolutely remarkable. Were there bad ideas in the Jesus movement? I think so. One of them is the rapture. The rapture is something that Chuck Smith had from his old church, and he brought it with him into the Jesus movement. To this day, Calvary Chapel says, "Oh yeah, the rapture is absolutely true," but it's not biblical. If you look hard at it, the Bible doesn't really support it. Now, I don't care, no cards and letters, folks. If you believe in the rapture, that's fine. No one's going to go to hell because they believe in the rapture or don't believe in the rapture. That no one's going to lose fellowship. I'll hang out with you if you disagree with me. It's not important. But there are ideas. The Moses model of the pastor. The pastor cannot be questioned. He's up apart from you. The pastor is Moses, and if you don't agree with something Moses said, there's the door. We'll show you that with love. That's Calvary Chapel. And women can't be pastors, and you go right down the line. Are there a bunch of bad ideas in Calvary Chapel? No. There's 3 or 4 kind of clingers there, but clang, but there's anything that makes it not a Christian church, and the good ideas are remarkable. You can find a Calvary Chapel anywhere in the world and go in and worship God. Just no mistaking it. And so I don't want to be critical there, but this power of these good ideas went around the world, like you said, like a rocket. It changed everything. And I just, again, regretting that, we didn't. I mean, to me, it was Adventism is even better. Let's make the Sabbath a blessing instead of a legalism, right? Let's teach the Sabbath as a great blessing to people. The soon return of Jesus Christ. No one's burning in hell. God doesn't burn people in hell forever. Hell is an event, not an eternal place, which I believe. I think that's got that right. Jesus said, "Where the dead are asleep." I think he got that right. None of these are issues that we have to break fellowship over. But these movements bring with them sets of ideas. And I think that a modernized, streamlined Adventism, call Ellen White our founder, one of our founders, respect her, see her for historical, keep her in the historical viewpoint. Stop quoting her like it's inspired. It's not inspired material. It just isn't. And if they just kind of let Ellen slide a little bit carefully, and make the Sabbath a blessing again, teach the second coming, teach all these other things, then accept the Jesus movement with these kind of a reformed Adventism, I think it would have been a better base to build a revolution from than Chuck Smith's background.
Yeah, they certainly missed out on an opportunity. And like I said earlier, we're not saying that people can't in any way. We're not saying they can't enjoy the Doug Batchelor version or the Heritage Singers version. No way are we saying that. We're just saying allow us to have our version, but still within the Adventist Church, and they didn't.
No,
And sadly, people like myself and many thousands and millions of others
everyone left.
left. Yeah, I read a stat the other day, and I might be wrong. I'm going to have James Baber on the show to clarify, and Steve actually Daly's accepted to come on again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
To talk about this stats of the Adventist Church. But I read a statistic that over 40 million people have left the Adventist Church since 1964. And
he says they're covering up the true amount of losses. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's what inspired me to chat to you again. You were writing some comments on his one of his feeds about the statistics.
Yeah.
Well, let's come to today's title, and we've got some background there today, everybody. Hope you've been enjoying the conversation so far. And I'm here with Don Cicchettie, and he's raised this question: did music kill my church? Tell us more about that title.
As I look at the collapse of North American Adventism in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 90s, when where it just, all the academies closed, the churches got bulldozed, I don't see anything that stands out as an explanation for why the church collapsed like that more than music. I think the Kenneth Woods and the Neil Wilsons hated the boomers' music so much that they rejected the Jesus movement, probably for that more than anything else. And so when you look at an Adventist church that now has 13% of what it used to have, how do you explain that? And I can't get away from music being an issue. I remember I went to Willow Creek, and they had the Willow Creek Church, huge, they had these seminars on modern worship. And they had, you go at the end of the week, you go into your room with the fellow people from your denomination. I go in there, and a bunch of young people, a bunch of mid-20s administrators. This is what we need. We need big sound, big lights, big stage, big music. This will revitalize the Adventist church. I'm like, no, it won't. The Adventist church has huge issues until it comes to terms with. They're going to just drive people out there. They'll let you start your church, but they won't go there, and you'll have to start from scratch. You knew about Celebration Center here in Redlands?
No.
Oh, we had a very modern church called Celebration Center. It was very much like a modern
an Adventist one, is it?
Adventist church, and Pastor Dan Simpson ran the church, and it had 2,000, 3,000 people for every service. It just packed. And down in front, they'd have people, and some people would wave banners around or dance or whatever. A few people would speak in tongues, but not very often. And so Paleo Adventists would come with their cameras and shoot all this supposedly devilish stuff going on in the front, and then put that up on the internet. And that was eventually they paid for a production of their own to show people, here's what our service is really like. So Celebration Center was thriving for quite a while, and then the pastor had an affair with a female pastor over in Riverside, and those two got together and dumped their spouses and crashed and burned the whole church. And Steve Daly ended up being assigned to shepherd Celebration Center after Pastor Dan left. And it had 120, maybe 100 people in it. And then within a year or so, it had closed up completely. One of the saddest things I've ever seen. And I do not see, or maybe you know something, think about this. With the Adventist leadership so vociferously rejecting the Jesus movement, theology, that's not a problem. Sabbath, that's not a problem. We're okay with the Sabbath, right? Ellen White, bit of a problem, but we can honor Ellen White without accepting everything carte blanche. What was the problem?
Yeah.
Problem with music.
Why is that, do you think?
Why do people? I mean, you and I both play, right? I play guitar since 1967. It's a bunch of silly strings. You pick it up and you go, um, some may come and some may go. Come on, people now, right? It's the pretty little song, right? I mean, that guy just died, Jesse Colin Young.
Mm.
A great song. I always thought the song is Christian. Read the lyrics, but he was not. And just how in the world can you take so much offense at that?
I know.
I mean, it's just a guy with a guitar.
Yeah.
I did at PUC when I was up there. I did an original for Christmas Vespers, and I went just by myself in an acoustic guitar. Went up to the main pulpit, and it was one of my Christian songs. It was a Christmas song actually, and it came from the Bible. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, there came three wise men from the east to Jerusalem. Right? Everyone loved it, and that's all we're doing. Why in the world
Yeah.
do you go out of your way to reject an entire generation?
Yeah.
And here's the
Have
result.
you drawn any conclusions to that question?
Well, why would you do that? Was there a conclusion for it?
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the things Steve Daly and his buddies were arguing about, which is if you take away the Adventist eschatology, which is we're the only true church,
Mm.
where we have the Sabbath, we have the spirit of prophecy, we have this, we have that. And if you're not one of us, well, you're probably going to hell. Ellen White said that. She said she saw envisioned a great meeting of thousands of people becoming Christians, but they're all going to perdition because their pastors took them into a Sunday church. And I saw in my mind, right? I see Greg Laurie at Anaheim Stadium, right, and bringing in 5,000 people or whatever, and Ellen White just put them all in hell. How can you do that?
Mm.
Do you don't think God accepts those people? So the Adventist Church has some issues in claiming, and this is what Stephen was the guy been talking about, that if you take away the eschatology, the closed door, standing before God without an intercessor, the personal righteousness Ellen White talked about, of which we have none, our righteousness is filthy rags. Well, all this non-biblical garbage that Ellen White taught about personal righteousness, you can't be a born-again Bible gospel Christian and believe that. You just can't. And don't get me started on the investigative judgment. Des Ford did a masterful job of refuting that. His work is unanswerable.
Yeah.
And what they did to him was pure politics. Ugly, ugly, ugly politics.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to have to answer for it in the judgment.
Yeah.
I've never met a man or listened to a man that I felt loved the Lord more than Des Ford did. And so, here it's like Uzzah in the ark. Don't touch.
Yeah.
If you touch that, you're going to be sorry. So yeah, the Sabbath is an issue. Ellen White, Adventist uniqueness, Adventists have the truth. We're the only true church. All this malarkey, that all played a role. But I think you can't take music out of the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's broader than did music kill my church. It's their lack of accepting this notion that people come at music from lots of different angles, perspectives, and cultures. I sang at the GC when it was at Toronto, Canada, and I had to send in several songs for them to
approve.
say yes or no to approve.
Yeah.
And they eventually settled on one which is very, very mellow ballad I'd written, and I took two people across with me that sang harmonies. It was very nice. But I remember as we were backstage about to come on the Wednesday night, and there was about 35,000 people out there. But as I'm standing in the wings, I thought, there's just there's always constantly hundreds of people getting up and sitting down and going to the toilets and out and coming in. They're talking. It was more like being in a football stadium, where people are watching the game, but there's also a lot of kind of audience getting sidetracked and all sorts of different things. But anyway, and I remember thinking, a quiet acoustic guitar mellow tune with harmonies is not going to work tonight. But anyway, we went ahead and did it, and we did get a good response.
Good.
But before I came on, they had this fantastic I don't know where they were from actually, but they had might have been Jamaica, and they had those tin pan drums where they can hit
the steel drums.
Yes, the steel drums.
Yeah,
They had some other percussion stuff going.
I love that.
They had singing, they had bass guitar, and these guys were literally playing just before we came on. But they were dancing, and they were doing different moves and turning around and doing little synchronized and choreographed steps. And the audience just loved it and were clapping and praised Jesus. And I thought, wow, but there's dance, there's toe tapping, but because of the cultural acceptance of it. So what I'm saying is that we all come at music from many different perspectives, and it's quite pious and self-righteous for the leadership of the Adventist Church to decide that, well, we'll accept this and we won't accept that. And I got banned from the Parramatta Seventh Adventist Church in Sydney for a while because I was doing bush dances and using Australia. I think you guys call them
Aboriginal.
No, bush dancing, where you go and take your partner by the hand and do-say-do and swing to the left. Right, you go.
Square dancing.
Square dancing, yeah. We call it bush dancing.
Okay.
And we appropriate some of your dances, and we use dances from folk music in Ireland and Scotland and England, and we mix it in with a lot of Australian music that was written by the early gold miners and whatnot. Anyway, the guy banned me, and as he was telling me I was no longer welcome back to that church because of my music, I looked at the poster behind him on the wall, and I said, you've got coming up next week an international night, and you've got and I just saw that there was Samoan slapping, where they slap their skin to beats.
Yeah.
And they had Thailand dancing with beautiful movements. They had some Maori people going to do the haka. And I said, you've just offended my culture. My culture is bush dancing.
That's right.
And as soon as he put it into that frame, he suddenly felt, particularly these days, people, this is 5-6 years ago, but they're very concerned. Oh, hang on a second. We don't want to upset people's culture. But only when he thought I was serious, but because he thought of that, he thought, oh, hang on, could this have some blowback on me? I'm offending someone's culture. So why do you think they're selective in the kind of, like, what is it about the kind of Jesus Revolution style music that they're particularly upset about?
I think they hated everything since 1955. My dad was extraordinarily opinionated about music, and he knew a lot about it. I got my really acute hearing. You can have a problem with your sound system. Wow, what's that? Sounds MIDI. I say, yeah, 1254 dB. Pull that down. And you'll go do it, and you'll, perfect. I've always had that ability, and my father had extraordinary hearing, and I don't mean sensitive hearing. I mean musically literate hearing, and he didn't like anything other than Frank Sinatra. He'd put up with Dean Martin, and he'd put up with Nat Cole, but he really only loved Frank Sinatra.
Isn't that interesting?
I grew up my whole life hearing what a bunch of garbage you kids play. And this year I don't know how to do anything. And I said, he's a New Yorker and they're very blunt. And I said, tell me who you like. Who's a good guitar player I could emulate? He said, oh, Charlie Christian. He was wonderful. I said, Charlie Christian's great, but don't you like B.B. King? Well, yeah, B.B. King, all right.
Yeah, why?
And I said...
And this is interesting because Adventists do this. like I can't understand why you would like Frank Sinatra but not Dean Martin.
Well, he liked Dean Martin. He just wasn't as good.
Yeah. Okay.
I like them all. Bring them on. You give me
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald. Give me all of that. So,
But he certainly didn't like more bluesy kind of stuff like B.B. King, and
B.B.
definitely rock
King
music.
learned his riffs on guitar from listening in a juke joint through the cracks in the wall to the
Yeah.
Count Basie Orchestra.
Yeah, that's right. Copying the
The lead
saxophones.
trumpet, the sax and the lead trumpet.
Yeah.
He'd do that on guitar, and that's
Yeah.
where he got. So it's very swinging stuff. But anyway, my dad's telling me you gotta play like Charlie Christian. Oh, okay, let me go listen to him. So we went up to band practice that night with my little band, and I said that we had a wonderful boogie woogie piano player and an old upright piano. Our piano player was a genius, and good drummer and a good bass player. And I said I want to do a shuffle. Right, and the piano player goes, "Oh yeah," and the bass players, right, and then I just started into some lead, right, just very simple stuff. I have a very old amplifier from Hammond organ, wasn't a Leslie, fixed 12-inch speakers. It sounded wonderful, had that musty 1930s tone to it. So I just started playing some lead on that, and it said we played for 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, okay, let's wrap it. Bam, done. Stopped the cassette, took it home. And I went to my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I went down to the library. This is how mean I was. I said, I went down to the library and there's this unreleased Charlie Christian thing. And it's really cool. I want you to hear it. So I put on a cassette we'd made, right? And he goes, I don't think I've heard that one before. No, I haven't heard that one. Wait for the guitar to come in. Oh, here comes the guitar. Oh yeah. Now we're talking. That's Charlie Christian. You kids should learn to play that, And off he went. I let him go, and my mother's over there crying, laughing. She knew what was happening, and I let him go. And then when he was done, I said, Dad, that's me. We just did that up in the studio today. What? That's our band. I made that up. That's improvised. That's me on the guitar. Get out of here. Oh, I'll pull the guitar up and play that note for note right now. Looked at me, frowned, walked down the hallway, slammed the door, and never came out for the rest of the evening. And I was to never mention that day again. And my mother is red in the face laughing. She says, you're a mean little blankety blank, aren't you? I said, no. She said, no, don't feel bad. He deserved that. He needed that. You know what? He left me alone after that.
Interesting.
He never bothered me about music again. Because he finally come to the point to realize those kids aren't bad. Those kids are pretty good. And when he finally came to accept me that way, he started putting, if I was playing somewhere, he put the notice up at work, for the bulletin board.
Yeah, interesting.
But what a mean thing to do. He deserved every inch of that. He really did.
It was a nice trick.
But everybody went through that in the 60s. We went through a generation of people who absolutely hated. And come on, if you listen to Benny Goodman or you're listening to Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie or Miles Davis, right? What are you really going to think of the Jefferson Airplane? I mean, what are you really going to think of Country Joe McDonald or, Candide or, even the Beatles psychedelic stuff? I love the Beatles, but, when they started getting into the LSD stuff, they lost me on that. So I understand, and I mentioned that in the article, I understand why those guys didn't like our music sometimes.
Yeah.
But I would tell my father, some of it's wonderful. Like what? And I didn't have a copy, so I called up the DJ, and he said, I told the DJ, I said, play for me the Rascals, People Gotta Be Free. He says, okay. He said, why? I said, because my dad says there's no good music today. And the only thing he likes is Frank Sinatra. And I want to show him that we have some good music today. So I hang up there. Thank you. And hang up the phone. On the radio, a few minutes later, I'm saying, Dad, come on here. And he says, I'm dedicating this to my buddy who called me up, who wanted me to play it to show Dad that we have some great music today. This is better than anything Sinatra ever did. So there. And all the world was so easy to see, right? wonderful song. He goes, that's a pretty good song, but he's got no business saying that about Sinatra. And he calls up the radio station to chew the guy out. So I'm not saying this to put my dad down because he was a good guy,
No.
but I'm saying how rabid that generation of people was and how opinionated about music they were. They were terrible.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's that side of it. And I've been trying to ponder as we've been chatting, and Deanna Eden's raised a great little comment that I think is worthy of reading out and pondering and discussing. Music is part of the problem, as in people's discerning if they like it, and when you're a bit older, you think, "Oh, I don't like that as much as this," or because you are discerning with sounds, you can actually tell the difference between, Frank Sinatra and someone else kind of copying him. But she mentions, but the major problem is doctrinal, and the Adventist Church being so controlling and cultish with behavioural issues, in her opinion, is what she says. Thank you, Deanna, for that comment. And it's true. Adventists blend such
It's cultic.
an
Let's be
emphasis
honest.
on the doctrinal side
It's
of it.
cultic.
That it's all that permeates into why they don't want certain types of music. And if push came to shove, I'm sure they wouldn't have even really wanted too much dancing with that Jamaican groove, the choreographed stuff. Like, if it wasn't just seen as a nice little, well, this is a reflection of your culture. If that turned into something that became more of something used in worship, and I think they'd soon be clamping down on that.
Yeah.
Actually, just another little side thing. Gillian Ford is watching. Hi, Gillian. She says, "Thanks, Don, for speaking so nicely about Des. Made me cry."
Oh,
So thank you,
he
Gillian.
deserves it. He was a great man.
And Frank Marandino writes, where I was talking about the difference between Dean genre-wise, he says Dean Martin was not kitsch. I know what the word is, kitschy, like kitsch.
It means cheap and kind of
Sinatra was actually, who was actually Sinatra, who was actually a brilliant musician.
Absolutely.
I really love Frank Sinatra.
Frank's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm taking voice lessons because I'm a songwriter. I write melodies with my voice. So I walk in the teacher's office and I go, in the wee small hours of the morning, right? Frank Sinatra. And I said, that takes a lot of nerve to take on Frank a cappella, doesn't it? She says, you bet it does. I said, well, give me 6 months. I'll nail it because I'm motivated. I got
motivated and
focused. She shows me how to do it. And Frank's brilliant. So's Dean.
Yeah. Yeah, and the delivery of the lyrics and the pacing of the lyrics. Yeah, Dean Martin's great at that. Have you, just talking about really interesting music of that era, the Beach Boys and Good Vibrations, when you listen to the melody and the bass line, they're all counterpoint, but it's just genius. Like, and the lady who played the bass on
I know her, Carol Kay.
Yes.
Yes.
And she's still alive, like 90 or something.
She's
Boy,
a
if you could
character. I love her.
if you could get me her details, I'd love to interview her. I've got another show called Arts News TV, another
I can get
program.
you I can connect you up. I mean,
I would love
think
it.
she'd be into it.
I have worshipped her. I'm using this.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And metaphorically. And when you listen to her bass part on that, which she would have, like Brian would have said to her, hey, try this and try that. But that particular bass line apparently is very much her own.
Oh,
and just listen to Good Vibration. I'm just saying, not to you, to people watching. Go to Spotify and just type in Beach Boys Good Vibrations and just listen to that. The bass line as it plays, the singing, and when it's put together, you just go, oh. There's another really.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
She tells the story of Sonny Bono, who was a producer, walking out of the control room and singing, and the beat goes on, and the beat goes on. Drums keep making a rhythm to the brain, right? And she says, That's cool. He says, it's just a ditty. I haven't got anything. I can't finish it. She says, come over here. She pulls the bass out, sing it. And the beat goes on. She goes, doom, 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 doom. And the beat goes, doom, 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 doom.
And it makes the song.
Pounds in a rhythm.
Yeah.
Doom, 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 doom.
Yeah.
You know, Sonny goes, oh my God, we've got a hit. You know,
Number one hit.
It was the bass that made
See,
that
what?
song.
Yes. Oh, yes. And many of those. And for those watching that don't know what we're talking about, Carol Kaye was a session musician in this period. The Monkees, Sweet
Late 50s to early 70s.
Neil Diamond, and they were called, I think, I can't remember, but they would play on so many of the songs that you know well.
Everything.
They were session musicians,
Yeah.
and often bands at the time would just hire these session musicians. Like Brian Wilson was bass player in the Beach Boys, but she played bass on Pet Sounds. I think she played 90% of it.
Glenn Campbell played a lot of guitar on all that Beach Boys stuff. He even sang some
Actually, Frank has just reminded me that Carol Kaye was the best part of the Wrecking Crew. That's what they called themselves.
I love Carol, and she's a cool lady. She'll tell you stories all night.
Oh, you've got to introduce me. I love her. I've been following her for years.
Yeah,
just because she's an incredible human. One of the things that this kind of conversation reminds me, I could see Ellen White in this kind of creative light. Great speaker, bringing in visions and offering some great, kind of insights. And she was like a celebrity style performer. And you look at Frank Sinatra's life and you think, oh boy, this guy was involved with some pretty shady stuff. And I'm not saying he certainly, but when you just go, hey, but what his music, inspirational, incredible. But Ellen White, Adventism weaves so much of a person's personality and claims into all of that creativity.
Yeah.
That it can only go a certain distance before it becomes cult-like. And when you're someone like Ellen White, who also adds on top of all this creativity, I think she was a really creative person.
Yeah,
I'd love to have met her and just listened to her speak and whatnot. But but then to make a claim, God told me that the dates William Miller, the 2,300 days, are accurate. He got that correct. But what he got wrong was what happened in heaven. And then you listen to Des Ford absolutely tear apart that notion of the 2,300 days.
Oh, absolutely.
Then you go, so what does that mean? It means this incredibly flawed human person that was very creative is making a claim that is something that Frank Sinatra never did. He's flawed, he's creative, you can enjoy the music, you can separate it. You can say, hey, what a flawed individual, but what incredible, inspiring music he's left us. With her, people defend her about, she was amazing and blah, 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 and she did this and she drew people to Jesus and she said all this and she wrote all that and she was a great public speaker and yes. But you have to then hit a wall when you realize her claims of prophetic supernatural connection with God were incorrect.
They were
wrong. They were false. So that taints all of that other stuff.
Oh. And now let me say this about Frank. There's a group on Facebook called Frank Sinatra Respectful Posting, and no criticism and nastiness is allowed. And there are hundreds of people on there who have had personal interactions with Frank. He's paid off people's mortgages. He's seen a girl on the news who couldn't pay her medical bills, and when it paid off, would not let anyone tell her who had done it. I mean, Frank was a generous, in many ways, a very kind man. Dina Martin, Dean's daughter, will tell you. They were like cousins, him and her and Nancy. I have really revised my view of Frank. Could he be hard and difficult? Of course. Was he see himself as a leader and he don't follow anyone else? Yes. But was he a bad guy? Was he a mobster? No, they got that wrong.
Yeah, and that's my point, is that when you accurately assess and place someone in the true realm of what it is to be creative, flawed, a human, you can then accept that stuff and you can see it in the right perspective. But when someone like Ellen, who I would love to be able to say the same things about that you just did with Frank Sinatra,
Right.
when they add an additional claim of a supernatural connection that can be confirmed as false. So Frank Sinatra said, and also, by the way, guys, God told me this, and there's this thing and that, blah, blah, blah. That would then make everything that he said to me seem like, oh, now you've gone and done it. Whereas I can accept flaws. I can, like there's people always banging on around here about all the great things Ellen White did in Kurrambong and Avondale, and she paid for houses to be fixed and she gave away food. Yes, 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 yes. But she also said, that William Miller's dates were right and they're demonstrably not right. So what does that mean? When you say God told me?
Well, that's
it.
One of my professors at PUC in theology was William H. Hyde, and he was 82, 84 in 1973. And one day we were discussing something in class, and he goes, I asked Sister White about this. And I went, wait a minute. You asked her? Oh, yeah. I was a young man, but she was alive and I knew her. Could I spend a little time with you after class today? I spent an hour with that man, preparing him with questions. And I said, what was she like? If you came up to her and you said, Sister White, I disagree with this you said on such and such. I don't think that's true. These Bible verses contradict you. Why would you say that? I think you got that wrong. I said, would she come out of a chair and disfellowship you? He said, no, of course not. She said, well, I believe that because of this, that, and the other. I'm sorry you don't. But she was gracious and kind to people. And now we know from the testimonies that she wasn't always gracious and kind to people. And what William Hyde said to me was that those should have never been published. The testimonies were never intended to be books.
I remember you saying that in our interview in May, actually.
Yeah. And he was right. I mean, he was right.
Yeah.
So I know someone who knew Ellen White, and he thought she was. Now, Steve will tell you that William Hyde saw himself as a great apologist for Ellen White and went around defending her. He wasn't that brain dead. If he didn't like her, if he didn't feel she was kind and decent like he said she was, he would have told me. And so it's like with Frank, you're not getting the whole story because you weren't there.
Yeah. Gospel Adventist. Hey, Stephen writes, a lot of musicians claim spiritual inspiration for their music. My point about Ellen is not about her claims of inspiration. It's that God is telling her specific things. A musician might go, oh, look, the Lord wrote these lyrics for me and they've come out. But that's for people to enjoy the music or listen to it or get inspired, take it or leave it. But if a musician says, God told me to write these words and to share them with you, and if you don't follow the words, you're not going to go to heaven. Well, it's a different kind of angle then. That's what I think Ellen White was doing.
I had God Help Me with a song. There was that one I did for Christmas. I went down Lake Berryessa, which is down the road on the other side of PUC. Beautiful lake. And a little spit of land. I went out there, sat in the rock with an acoustic guitar. And I said, I could really use a song here. I can go play a Christmas hymn. Well, I'd like to have something new. And I prayed, help me with it. So I turned over, the Yeshu Joy Man's Desire. Ba 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 ba, right? I turned that around. I went from the top, and down to a suspension. And I said, oh, I like that. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Yeah, well, that works. And within 30 minutes, the song was done. And I sang it 20 times so I wouldn't forget it. I had a notepad, wrote the words down, and before I got up again, I sang it 20 times. And then I got up and I went back to go to the car, and there were 5 women skinny dipping in the lake right behind me. I hadn't even seen them. And I can tell you that I looked at them like they were little babies. There was nothing sexual about them. They were completely naked, but I looked at them like, okay, it did not give me any arousal at all in any way. And I can tell you that the space I was in at that moment was so deeply committed to God's helping me with the song that I realized that any lust in the world I ever experienced, that's me. That's me.
Yes, they're very separate, aren't they?
That's
Yeah.
me. If I
And
respond to a woman lustfully, that has nothing to do with her. That's me.
yeah, yeah, that's why the people who I did a show on this the other day, I think, but what people who um, have given us something inspired and inspirational, just because they might be flawed and do terrible things, it shouldn't take away from that inspiration
And
at all. They are
you,
very separate.
you know how many
And
people
what
I
I'm
told? I told that God gave me that song. How many people? None. You're one of the first people to ever hear that story.
you
Do,
mentioned
do I
it.
know that God actually contributed to that song? I know He did.
Yeah.
I've never told anyone
And
that.
and that kind of inspiration is different, I guess, to what I'm saying Ellen White's claims for inspiration were. That hers was a special path to follow that would lead you and literally make or break your salvific opportunities.
Well, that's right.
True inspiration with music and poetry and writing is different to that kind of inspiration. And when someone makes such bold claims of a prophetic nature, I judge that way more harshly than I would judge Ellen White's life and the good and bad things she did.
That's a really good point.
I wouldn't give two hoots. I would actually embrace Ellen White as an incredible figure and love exploring everything about her, taking the good with the bad, if it wasn't for her bold additional claim on top of everything
Yeah.
that just takes it away.
Yeah. I said to Steve Daly once, name a really virtuous founder of a church. Just one.
Yeah.
The Anglicans, Henry VIII. Right? The Mormons, Joseph Smith. You know, Jim Jones, Marshall Applewhite, the Borgia Popes, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible. I have yet to come up with, but Lonnie Frisbee, come on. For that matter, now Chuck Smith was a very virtuous man. He was. I met him, and I'm convinced he really loved the Lord. John Wimber was an interesting guy, but I think he loved the Lord also. Lonnie Frisbee was a mess, and later in his life, he was homosexual. He came out, and he was using the churches that he pastored with as places to meet young men, and they all eventually threw him out. So I said to Steve, you know, where are the churches that were started by people of great virtue? I mean, Martin Luther was an anti-Semite. John Calvin had his theological rival burned at the stake.
Calvin murdered someone.
Yeah,
murdered someone. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to tease apart though is that everybody is flawed, and it seems to me that extra inspirational people that create incredible movements are often flawed even more than the average bear. But when people start making the Joseph Smith kind of claims, that falls into a category that I then turn away from. If I found out that Frank Sinatra was making big cultic claims and trying to manipulate people based on these claims,
right,
I'd probably be less likely to listen to his stuff.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah. Sir Nilo writes in a funny line, right? Cannabis was burned during worship in ancient Israel. Maybe Ellen had something similar for her vision. Well, I'm pretty sure her father was a hatter, and they used, was it mercury in the when they made the hats or something as part of the curate?
Yeah.
What's the word for that? The curing process, and apparently that can lead to all sorts of delusions.
That's why they call them Mad Hatters.
Mad Hatters, and I'm pretty sure she was known to have helped her father in the early days with making
anyone
hats.
that pays any attention to our generation, my generation, your generation, and they can see what regular marijuana use has done to us, and can honestly, with a straight face, say, "Oh, I'll take some of that," is living in a fantasy land. I mean, that stuff's garbage, and it makes you stupid, makes your brain slow. It becomes a habit. It takes over your life, and the stuff the kids have today is like 220-volt plug on the wall. A friend of mine, I don't use it, and I never did drugs back then, even. But my friend went to his friend's house. I keep hearing about this marijuana that's all so powerful these days. Oh, here, take a hit. So he takes a hit, boom, falls on the floor. He said, I've never felt anything
Different.
like that. And the
Yeah.
amount of psychosis in the emergency room that's causing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The psychosis is the bad thing. Yeah.
You won't get too
'Cause-
far with me in cannabis. That's a no-go
Yeah.
road.
Yeah. Gospel Adventist also writes that a lot of rock and roll stars dated teenage groupies. That's another area that, to me, if you're making cultic prophetic claims and if you're dating underage girls, those are the two things that are the no-go zones for me
No,
as
yeah, you
far
get out of there.
as like putting people into their artistic sort of perspective. And there's a lot of double standards in these kind of areas. There's some grey areas there. I know of at least two really well known that everyone. There's no secret. You look into it a little bit, and it's easy to find two very well respected, pop and rock stars of the 70s, and they, were with underage groupies, and
Gary Glitter, yeah, comes to mind.
there's well, he's definitely one, but there's two that, even though it's known, people will still love their music. But if you tried to play any Gary Glitter, there's no, of course, and it should be that way. But I'm saying it should be that way right across the board.
Yeah.
But if someone's just super, super, super amazing, people are kind of, they kind of excuse it. And yet, in the two cases I'm thinking of, they would totally, provable cases. And that double standard about that, and the double standard about the prophetic cultish claims, that irks me in a way that I
And I would say also, don't worship rock stars. Rock stars are jerks. I mean, Alice Cooper.
Yeah, don't even worship people that start great movements.
Yeah.
Don't even worship Frank Sinatra. Don't, just enjoy the contribution.
Yeah. Alice Cooper is a big friend of Greg Laurie's now, and he's a committed Christian. And you can go in the Arizona church soup kitchen on Sundays, and you can get your bowl of soup from Alice Cooper. And my brother's golfed with him and said he's the real deal, born again Christian. And he said, and this is the best rock star quote I've ever heard in my life. He said, "What do people care what rock stars think about anything? We're all a-holes." I said, the world in a nut. The world in a nut,
Yeah.
There's a walnut. We put the whole world in it right there.
What a great thing to say and be self-aware about, and not get caught up in your own hype.
How do we really care what they think? Oh, Bruce Springsteen thinks this and that about the president. Well, hey, I care about that.
Yeah, I know. There's an overemphasis on their opinion.
And it's about let's be honest, about fame, okay? I didn't go off into fame and write songs and become a rock star. I went in academia and I took a theology degree. I did all this stuff, and I'm glad I did what I did. I married a librarian. I didn't go into the rock world. But they still think, because they're famous. I've had dinner with a bunch of rock stars. They still think they're smarter, better, hipper. They're at the top of the heap. You can be a PhD in something, and they'll still think they're cooler than you are.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of drugs,
Yeah. Frank Marandino writes, Ellen G. White believed her visions. This reminds me of a George Stanza quote. Just remember, Jerry, it's not a lie if you believe it.
That's right. You realize there's a direct line from Ellen White to David Koresh.
Yes.
There really is.
Yeah.
So that kind of wild-eyed occultic Adventism goes all the way back. And that Adventists were not conservative, meek, quiet little people. They were shouting Methodists.
Yes, that's right.
And the idea that David Koresh was somehow some aberration, he wasn't.
Yeah. Stephen Beagles writes that yes, but she corrected her mistakes. And then Rochelle counters with where a lot of us have issues with her is is
That's
that
right.
as a supposed prophet, getting all her facts straight from God, shouldn't be making mistakes. There's certainly things that I'm totally happy for her to have made mistakes and clarified, but don't tell me that you heard from God that William Miller's date setting was correct and it turns out it's not, but God told you it was. She can't even herself. Let's say she believed herself, she didn't believe it. That it doesn't even matter. I think she did believe it, as Frank
I do
said.
too.
But you cannot say, "Oh, whoops, I made a mistake about that," if your initial claim is it came from God.
Bingo. And she said, I was shown that the people on Jupiter were tall and slender. You know, there's no surface on Jupiter. Just one thing after another, you know. So there's a punishment for prophets that get it wrong in the Old Testament. It's not pretty.
That's correct. Yeah. Now, look, we're going to wrap it up soon. Just what are some other things that, on our topic there that music, did music kill my church? And we're referring to Adventism, and in many ways we're referring to not music killing it, but a lack of understanding about the depth of music and trying to cookie cut and control people. Like, you're not allowed to listen to this, you're not allowed to play that kind of music. What sort of final thoughts have you got there on this topic? And boy, I've loved our conversation, by the way. It's great.
Try to define good music. It can't be
Yeah.
done.
No.
It can't be done. I have a friend who said, well, what is the complexity? Well, in that case, if that was true, Weather Report would be the greatest thing ever. Bebop, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be the greatest music ever. Well, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
There's a little child going, Jesus loves me, this I know. Might be as good as it gets in music.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
know.
yes, yes. Well, that's such a good reflection there.
Bach, yeah, ba 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 ba, or bum da 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 da.
Yeah.
How's it get any better than that?
Yeah.
And yet it's simple.
Yeah.
So, being that you really can't define good music, it's kind of like pornography. I can't define it, but I know when I see it. Good music is defined by the number of people it truly blesses. And it has to be done that way.
And it might even bless only a handful of people, but
Yeah.
and that's okay as well. Yeah.
Bob Dylan.
The point is,
go ahead.
I was going to say, the point is that people shouldn't curate collectively what people listen to. I totally get. So I run a kind of center where all sorts of things go on. There's poetry and djembe drumming classes and all sorts of like really interesting sort of multicultural kind of things happen and occur, and we have a great time every week. I do a program every Monday night, but there's certainly, I have a special guest once a month, and I'm certainly careful who I invite because I don't want whatever style they're playing to go against the general theme of what we're doing. So I'm not saying Adventists as a movement shouldn't have some kind of overall vibe, but they shouldn't try and control and cookie cut and curate the pockets of people and places that fully embrace certain styles of music and worship, and the pastor enjoys it, and the flock enjoy it, and the community enjoy it. It's that kind of over control of this that I think is concerning within the Adventist church.
Yeah.
And it's more prevalent in the Adventist church than other denominations.
It really is. One of my new songs is called Across the Finish Line. And it is about it's about a Christian death. It's asking God to please grant me a Christian death. And when Dallas Willard died, he died of pancreas cancer. And when he died, his biographer, Gary Moon, was there with him. And Gary got overcome, and he left the room and went to the nursing station. Dallas knew what had happened. And Dallas got out of bed in a wheelchair and rolled out there and said, "Don't cry. You'll see me soon." This is the person who's dying, comforting the friend. I mean,
wow.
What? And so when he died, which was just a few minutes later, his last words were, "Thank you," and off he went.
Wow.
And I've talked to Jane Willard, his wife, and Becky, his daughter, and I've said, somebody said to him, but in my opinion, somebody said to him at that moment, Well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Yes.
And he went, thank you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just, that's the kind of
Powerful.
death that each one of us should wish for. That's the kind
Yeah.
of righteous death. And so that's what the song's about. I know just where I'm going. I don't mind.
Mhm.
I'm going across the finish line. And then the chorus, well done, well done, well done.
Oh, I love it.
And
How can we get in touch with your musical
I got to finish that one
manifestation?
first. But
Yeah.
it's that's metal. It's you
Powerful. Yeah.
know, it's just heavy, heavy, heavy. And but there's a harmonized minor scale sort of a, remember Sting's thing, free, free, set them free. It's
Yeah.
like that
Yes.
up
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
top.
Yeah.
There's a two voice harmony with a minor to a major, descending
Yeah.
part, and then with that as the background, the voice comes in, and the guitar is
Yeah.
just bam, you
Yeah, I
know,
love that.
it's just, you know,
I think people who have an eclectic taste in music are very lucky because, like, there's a band from Canada called the Tea Party. They're not a political band.
no politics.
Um, they play like it's as if you go back. They play this music that's kind of medieval, kingdoms, kings, and it's big and loud, and I've seen them many times, and I've just stood near the front, and it like distorted guitars and incredible lyrics, and but I do also love Frank Sinatra, I think Steve Beagles mentioned earlier the Pixies. I've seen the
Oh,
Pixies live. I
lovely,
love them.
lovely band.
Um,
And
bands
I
like
like the
like
English folk
Wilco.
background, Steel Eye Span,
Yes.
Fairport
Oh,
Convention. You know, this stuff's breathtaking.
so if you can find it in your heart to explore, like, I don't know if you've listened to much Yes,
Oh, I love Yes, yeah,
yeah, particularly love John Anderson's vocals.
yeah.
I'll tell you an interesting thing. I can't remember the name of the band, but you really easily find it. John Anderson, was in Yes, and he left and does a lot of solo work, but he came across this Yes covers band, and I can't remember their name, but if you just type in John Anderson, Yes, John's latest cover band or whatever,
Yeah.
and he just said, "Wow, you guys are amazing. Maybe we do a gig together?" So they did some Yes songs with him singing, and it sounds better than Yes. And that inspired him, and he wrote a whole album with them of new
Oh,
songs,
that's great.
and it sounds like a Yes album, but way better than you can ever imagine. It's only just been released.
I'm gonna
So
hear
I
this.
love exploring those kind of, little avenues and side things, and
There's some
wow,
things
I've
I can't
really
express
yeah,
without really heavy music.
yeah.
There's some things I don't do all of that. I have a song I did for my daughter Samantha. It's called Lullaby Number One, Samantha, and it is kind of Bach-ish sort of a thing, and a little Moody Blues-ish. It's
Yes.
a gorgeous song. I'm really hard on my own stuff. This one is absolutely breathtaking, and
So
it's
have you
so
got a site where
gentle.
people can listen to music you've released? Is there a Spotify link or
I
something
have
I
to
can
finish.
share, or a website?
Oh, you know what? I'll send you the one I've got. I've got a blues thing I did called "Life in the Shadows." That's up on Spotify, or it's up on
iTunes or
Sound
Apple Music?
Sound something or other.
SoundCloud, is it?
Yeah, SoundCloud. I'll send you that. I'll send you that tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll add that to the comments section in
There's a
YouTube
blues thing I
and
did
Facebook.
on there. All these other ones, the lullaby, the overture, the heavy metal thing, all those things aren't done yet. So I've got to get
Mhm.
them done. One of the first things I'm going to do is the lullaby, Samantha's lullaby, because that is
Nice.
just so pretty. And so I'll go from the heaviest metal you can imagine to well, though I like melodies too much. Metal today is so much growling and it's really silly. And so
Yeah.
my metal is probably 20 years old.
Yeah, nice.
You know,
Hey, one last question I see here directed to you. Seriously, as in serious question, I think Cindy Lou asks, guest Dan Cicchettie, do you have an opinion on Dan Vass?
who is that?
That's what I was going to say. I don't know. Who is that, Cindy Lou?
Cindy Lou Woo sounds like a Little Richard song.
Yeah. And someone earlier, I think Barb T was talking about Little Richard signing a check for her church because he was a Seventh-day Adventist. And,
yeah, he went to Kansas Avenue Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Little Richard, and he was involved with the Hollywood Adventist Church, and he was also a big fan of 3ABM and was often on the show doing interviews. He did some music there once. He, to me, is the greatest of the rock and roller era, that late 50s, early 60s. Like, honestly, he is the best. Like, I just see him as the beginning of it all. Isn't that ironic? Boy, what a thing to say at the end of an interview where the music and Adventists don't understand it and have in many ways not embraced something that could have really changed the Adventist church positively. Isn't it ironic that in many ways Little Richard, who was an Adventist, created that whole thing that they hate?
Yeah,
like that. What's the what?
I mean, he had his struggles.
Go and listen to that. Oh, of course. And he's in a classic example of where I can totally cope with all his struggles and his flaws, because his inspiration, when you separate those two, like go and listen to anything he did live, even not even his recorded work. Some of his live stuff is phenomenal.
Oh, it's crazy good
voice. It's like
I can tell you this much.
Quintessential rock voice.
He seemed to be a born-again Christian when he died.
Yeah.
He seemed to be very much on God's side, and I'm going to heaven, despite all of his homosexuality, all the other stuff he got involved with. I think we'll see Richard in the New Kingdom. I fully expect it.
Yeah. There's lots of good comments coming in about bands that we should all check out and music. And I love it.
Send me something on that one that John Anderson's with. I'm interested. That new one?
Yes, that Cindy mentioned. Yeah, maybe she can give us a bit more info.
Who is Dan Vask?
I don't. Oh, hang on. It sounds like he's a singer. Opera, hard rock, religious songs.
Well, I'll have to look him up.
We'll all go and look him up. Hey, what a great conversation, Don. As always, I've loved chatting with you today.
It's been fun.
And let's do it again, and we'll be able to reflect, say, oh, it wasn't until last.
We'll see if Kevin Paulson makes a trip and punches me in the nose.
Yeah, I think I interviewed Kevin. Can anyone tell me if I did or I didn't? Maybe I didn't. I vaguely remember interviewing him anyway. So thanks everyone for watching. Join me this time tomorrow, starting time of the show, as I re-release this ongoing season 2 re-release that I've got going on Glacier View and Des Ford and how he was treated, and really looking at the nuts and bolts of it. Season 2 was huge, and now we're making it all available live with commentary on YouTube to the world, not just hidden inside the small Facebook private group. So Ross Cole, Dr. Ross Cole tomorrow, and Don will have you back, and everyone, catch you later.
Bye-bye.
See ya.